Have you ever poured your heart and soul into a promising initiative, something you truly believed in, only to watch it just sputter?
Oh, yeah.
You see incredible leaders burn out, momentum stalls, and all that amazing potential seems to just vanish. It's incredibly frustrating, and honestly, we've probably all been there.
It's a really common and, painful experience. But what if I told you that often the real problem isn't a lack of vision or even a lack of passion?
Okay.
It's not really individual failure at all. This deep dive into our sources reveals something profound, almost counterintuitive. It's fundamentally about poor team architecture.
Team architecture.
Exactly. The core concept is that the way a team is built, its structure, its size, and especially the unique blend of gifts within it, radically impacts its ability to truly be fruitful and, sustainable.
That's such a powerful reframing, isn't it? It suggests we need to completely rethink how we approach growth, maybe.
It really does.
Our mission today is precisely that, to explore how to design teams that don't just grow, but expand without imploding,
Right, teams that multiply.
Teams that genuinely multiply their impact, naturally reproduce leadership, and somehow stay aligned even through rapid growth. And this isn't just about making things more efficient, it's about creating sustainable living movements. We're drawing on time-tested models, from ancient biblical patterns right up to modern applications. And here's the insight that really struck me from the material. It's not burnout. It's misdesign.
That quote is powerful.
That sentence alone flips the entire narrative, doesn't it? It means the silent erosion of scalability we see in so many organizations isn't about people failing, but about a strategic blind spot in how teams are built.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And when we look at traditional team design, the default strategy is often what our sources call the illusion of more hands on deck.
Right, just throw more people at it.
We instinctively think bigger is always better. But our research cautions that unchecked, oversized groups quickly develop silos, communication breaks down, and even the most gifted leaders get exhausted, just stretched too thin.
And on the flip side, teams that are too small or maybe too homogenous, they can simply lack the necessary perspectives, right? Or the energy to expand.
Precisely. And this leads right into what the sources label the myth of the visionary savior.
Yes. The leader who has to do it all.
Exactly. This is where the modern leader is expected to wear every conceivable hat. Preacher, visionary, administrator, strategist, counselor, crisis manager, financial director. I mean, the list goes on.
You've probably felt this pressure yourself at some point. It's just,
Yeah.
It's unsustainable.
And critically, it's unbiblical. This model turns the leader into the ultimate bottleneck.
Everything has to go through them.
And that inevitably leads to leader burnout, team dysfunction, and a complete lack of reproduction in the long run. It just grinds to a halt.
Yeah.
Our sources even provide a fascinating historical warning. Think about the 18th century Great Awakening. There were incredible revivals, huge moments of fervor.
But a lot of them just fizzled out, right?
They did, because often no structures were left behind to actually nurture the new converts. The fire just went out.
Right. Contrast that with, say, the Moravian Church during the same period. They paired that fervor with small, highly accountable groups, these bands.
And because of that intentional team architecture, those movements outlived any single charismatic leader.
It's a powerful example of how structure doesn't have to stifle the fire. It can actually sustain it, even multiply it.
It truly is. And this brings us to the biblical blueprint for multiplying teams, which goes far beyond just relying on a single visionary leader.
Okay.
God's design from the very beginning is inherently about multiplication. What's truly astonishing about God's original blueprint isn't just growth, but inherent reproduction.
Like in Genesis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In Genesis, God embedded the mandate, be fruitful and multiply, into creation itself. It's not just about building bigger, but building to split and reproduce a principle that's almost entirely absent from typical organizational thinking today.
It's a call to reproductive stewardship, then, for everything, including our teams.
That's the idea. And this isn't just for individuals or families. It applies directly to teams. Just look at Jesus and the 12.
Okay, yeah.
He had all the power and wisdom of the universe, yet his model was, shockingly decentralized. He chose 12, let's be honest, unremarkable men.
Right. Not the obvious choices.
Not at all. And he delegated real authority to them, gave them power, sent them out maybe before they even felt ready. It was an anti-ego architecture.
He was building around a kingdom principle. Leaders are seed bearers, not stars.
Absolutely. Jesus wasn't building around his own personality. He was building a model designed for reproduction. And then you look at Paul's teams.
Often seen as the lone wolf, but he wasn't, was he?
Not at all. He's often miscast that way, but his letters show a man surrounded by deep, complex partnerships. Barnabas, his bridge builder; Timothy, his spiritual son; Luke, Silas, Priscilla, Aquila, all co-laborers.
So his model was all about relational interdependence.
It insisted on it. Every team member had a distinct function, a voice, a role, not just a task list.
This really highlights that the success of God's mission is never centered on one individual's brilliance.
No, it's always about the intentional collaboration of spirit-formed communities. Our sources emphasize that this requires what they call covenantal architecture.
Meaning teams built on commitment and trust? Like a family bond, almost.
Yes, deep mutual commitment, not just tasks. It also demands spiritual synergy, where the combined spiritual power of the team is greater than the sum of its parts.
Okay.
And biblical ecosystem thinking, which is about understanding how different parts of the team support and nourish each other, like in nature.
Those are really foundational elements for building teams that truly multiply. Powerful stuff.
Precisely. So when we talk about team architecture, we need to dig into three key elements: structure, size, and gifting.
Right. Let's start with structure.
Okay, many teams default to either rigid hierarchy, which centralizes everything and creates bottlenecks,
We've all seen that.
or, on the other end, flat egalitarianism where everyone leads, but maybe no one really owns anything.
Yeah, that can be chaotic too. Neither really fosters multiplication.
Exactly. And the biblical model seems to be this structured collaboration. Jesus delegated, he sent his disciples out in pairs, he even rebuked their power struggles, showing how servant leadership should work.
And Paul, too, didn't just centralize power. He consistently appointed leaders, right? In multiple cities, entrusting local churches to capable people.
And that clarity, as our sources point out, is crucial. Clarity breeds momentum, while ambiguity absolutely kills trust.
Like the story of Moses, with his father-in-law's advice.
Spot on. Jethro advised him to delegate leadership to capable men in groups of tens, fifties, hundreds, and thousands. This wasn't just about efficiency, it created clarified roles.
Which liberated creativity and focus and distributed the authority.
Exactly. And the early church also showed shared leadership in crucial moments, like the Jerusalem Council. Healthy structure strategically gives authority away.
And crucially, it creates pipelines. That's so vital, isn't it?
Essential for the long haul.
Healthy teams aren't just about the here and now. They're constantly looking to the future. They create pipelines where leaders are discovered, developed, and deployed.
Like Paul's instruction to Timothy, passing on what he'd learned to reliable people who could then teach others. That's generational faithfulness in action.
Okay, so structure is key. What about size?
Ties is next, and there's a paradox here. What often begins as an agile movement can calcify into slow, sluggish machinery as it grows.
Yeah, it loses that initial spark.
Our sources remind us that while it feels intuitive to add more people to solve problems, Scripture consistently shows us the power of small teams for big impact.
Like Gideon's army.
Perfect example. Famously reduced from 32,000 to just 300, to make it clear that God's power was at work, not human numbers.
Or look at Jesus. He had thousands of followers, but his deepest investment was in the 12, right? And even more intimately in the 3.
He knew that intimacy multiplies integrity. Transformation happens most effectively in small, focused groups.
And the early church didn't expand by building mega congregations primarily.
No, they multiplied through decentralized micro-communities,
Yeah.
breaking bread in their homes. That organic model enabled rapid discipleship, authentic accountability, and decentralized leadership development. It was built to multiply.
So is there a sweet spot for size?
Our sources suggest there is. Maybe 3 to 7 members for deep discipleship and collaboration, and perhaps 6-10 for agile leadership teams.
Those aren't arbitrary numbers, are they?
No, they come from research into group dynamics and communication effectiveness. If you go beyond, say, 12, 15 members, it's often a clear signal that you should seriously consider breaking into sub-teams.
Because there are dangers with larger teams.
Oh, absolutely. Teams of 8 or more members,
Yeah.
communication complexity just explodes exponentially. There are too many connections.
People feel less seen, too, maybe. Less connected.
Definitely. Reduce cohesion. Decision-making slows way down. And you get social loafing that someone else will do it syndrome.
Oh, right. So that's the difference between addition and multiplication. Adding builds empires, multiplication builds movements.
Well put. And that leads us to the crucial element of gift mix. Fruit really does come from functional balance.
Okay, the different types of contributions people make.
Exactly. Our source uses a powerful model, often called the Fivefold Ministry, or APEST, which stands for Apostles, Prophets, Evangelists, Shepherds, and Teachers, as described in Ephesians 4.
And it says Christ gave these gifts to equip his people for works of service.
Right. These are often referred to as the five voices of a healthy team. Apostles are the architects and activators. They pioneer, see the big picture, build systems.
But their shadow side. They can overlook people sometimes, burn teams out by moving too fast.
That's the risk. They give us the why and where we're going. Then prophets are the conscience and compass. They discern God's heart, bring correction, keep alignment.
Shadow side there could be being overly critical or detached from the practical strategy.
Yeah, potentially. They keep the fire on the altar, ensuring integrity.
Then you have evangelists, the door openers. They connect the team to the outside world, invite, proclaim, mobilize.
Their shadow side. Maybe prioritizing initial conversions over the long haul of discipleship. They keep the front door open.
And shepherds, or pastors, they're the healers and guardians, right? Caring for community, nurturing health, building belonging.
Exactly. Their shadow side might be resisting necessary change or being overprotective. They cultivate the culture, the soil for the vision.
And finally, teachers. Builders of foundations. They illuminate scripture, safeguard doctrine, cultivate maturity.
Their shadow can be getting overly intellectual, emphasizing knowledge over actual obedience, or getting bogged down in theory. They provide that doctrinal ballast, stability.
The key here, it sounds like, is harmony over hierarchy. These aren't levels.
Not at all. It's a circle, not a ladder. Distortion happens when one gift dominates the team. An all-apostolic team, for example, can burn itself out without the balance of others.
And a team without prophetic sensitivity might lose direction.
And without shepherds, people can start to feel like tools instead of treasures. It needs balance.
And we shouldn't forget the other gifts mentioned elsewhere, like administration, mercy, helps. Those are vital too, right?
Absolutely essential. Remember in Acts, the apostles wisely appointed deacons to handle logistics. That freed them up. It shows core function needs sustained, specific support.
Okay, that's a helpful framework. Now let's look at some field-tested examples from Paul's life. These really bring it to life.
Yeah, they serve as powerful archetypes for team design. First, Paul and Barnabas. This is a classic pioneer apostle with a local co-laborer dynamic.
Paul the catalyst, Barnabas the encourager.
You got it. Paul provided the catalytic vision, while Barnabas brought that relational credibility, that emotional covering. He even vouched for Paul early on.
The insight here is profound. God sends complementary teams, not lone heroes. Pioneering vision needs that relational wisdom alongside it.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Their sharp disagreement over John Mark. It actually resulted in 2 mission teams instead of 1.
Multiplying their impact unexpectedly.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that conflict, when handled well, can sometimes lead to reproduction, not just division. It wasn't just drama.
Wow. Okay, next, Paul and Timothy.
The mentor and disciple. This was a deeply paternal relationship. Paul was the spiritual father, training Timothy in context, championing his calling. Timothy was the faithful learner, co-author.
Even though he was apparently timid sometimes.
Right. The insight here is that multiplication is deeply relational. Vision without equipping and releasing just falls flat. Discipleship is personal, not just a program.
And Paul didn't wait for perfection, did he? He trusted young leaders.
He absolutely did. And this created that incredible 4-generation leadership pipeline. Paul to Timothy to reliable people who could then teach others. That's sustainable.
Okay, who's next? Paul, Priscilla, and Aquila.
Yes, the specialized field team. Paul was the apostolic mobilizer, but Priscilla and Aquila were the local specialists, tent makers, hosts of house churches, known mentors.
And Priscilla's leadership was notable, wasn't it? Even teaching Apollos more accurately.
Highly notable. This partnership shows that mission thrives where that big picture vision meets local wisdom. They multiplied the work without centralizing control, grounding the gospel organically in the local culture.
Then there's Paul, Titus, and others. More of an adaptive network.
Exactly. Paul was truly a network builder. He entrusted Titus to establish order and appoint elders in Crete. Other co-laborers like Luke, the historian, Silas, the prophet and stabilizer, Epaphroditus, the risk-taker, they all played distinct, crucial roles.
So the core insight is that expansive kingdom movements emerge from empowered, distributed networks, not rigid centralization.
Authority releases, it doesn't restrain. It allows for contextualization over rigid uniformity.
And you mentioned Silas, he deserves a closer look, the steadfast companion.
He really does. A prophet and a leading man from Jerusalem, he became Paul's loyal, enduring partner. Remember them singing in chains in Philippi?
Yeah.
His spiritual constancy and prophetic sensitivity were absolutely essential for the movement's longevity. His example shows us that not all key leadership means being in charge or the one out front.
Powerful. And finally, the Ephesus team, a blueprint for local leadership.
It really is. Paul's longest day, 3 years, was about building a leadership community, not a personality cult around himself.
He specifically entrusted the elders with flock care.
He did. It was a multi-gifted, cross-vocational team. Priscilla and Aquila were there, Tychicus, Epaphras, functioning as a high-capacity, low-dependence ecosystem.
High-capacity, low-dependence, I like that.
The insight from Ephesus is powerful. Apostolic ministry plants vision, but eldership protects and stewards it. Sustainable teams need that vocational diversity and intentional succession. Paul prepared them for his departure.
He really was building for his absence, not for dependence on him.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Okay, let's transition to some practical applications for designing these multiplying teams. How do we actually do this?
Right. First, assessing gifting. It's not just about tests, is it?
No, our sources strongly recommend going beyond typical spiritual gifts tests. Use observation, affirmation from others, conversations about calling, and importantly, a graceful process of trial and error.
And focusing on the fruit people produce.
Crucially, emphasize 360-degree feedback, looking at the actual impact, the fruit, not just self-assessment or potential.
Which leads directly to building teams around gifting, not just titles or whoever happens to be available.
Yes. When you intentionally align people by their natural gift, their God-given design, it unleashes incredible energy. You automatically avoid over-reliance on one gift type because harmony and balance are always the goal.
And it's essential to create leadership pipelines for each gift type, right? Not just generic leadership training.
Absolutely. Identify seasoned practitioners for each of the APEST functions, create mentoring structures, and equip them to train others, just like Paul did with Timothy. That's how you achieve generational faithfulness in leadership.
Okay, our sources mentioned a practical guide, a decision tree.
Yes, the team structure decision tree. It's pretty straightforward. If you have 2 members, the focus is on adding complementary gifts and building your core. Identify the missing APEST gifts and recruit strategically to fill those gaps.
Makes sense. And for 5-12 members, that was the sweet spot.
Right. Here, you clarify roles, deepen communication, and actively develop leaders within the existing team, preparing them perhaps to lead new teams down the line.
And if your team hits 13 or more members?
The tree clearly says divide and multiply. Cluster into smaller, gift-mixed units with empowered sub-team leaders. Then, crucially, maintain clear inter-team connection and communication.
This prevents that bloat and slowdown that inevitably happens in larger groups, keeps things agile.
Exactly. And you need to watch out for the warning signs of implosion, regardless of team size.
What are those again?
Things like constant conflict, which often points to undefined authority, or a lack of clear direction, maybe indicating an apostolic or prophetic void.
Burnout is a big one.
Huge. Usually from overdependence on just a few individuals. And stagnation when a team stops moving forward and just shifts from movement into maintenance mode. That signals a deep need to recalibrate.
Like the early Jerusalem church facing dysfunction, they responded with structural innovation, appointing the deacons.
They address the structure. And that's so important because it ties into embracing healthy division. Sometimes splitting is the right move.
We shouldn't automatically fear division as failure.
Not at all. As we saw with Paul and Barnabas, when it's prompted by clear vision and guided by the Spirit, division can be catalytic. It's about multiplication for the mission, not just personal drama.
And underlying all of this is prioritizing relational health.
Absolutely. Trust is truly the hidden engine of multiplication. Strong teams learn to redeem conflict constructively. They build relational bandwidth through shared meals, retreats, consistent check-ins, using biblical principles for conflict resolution. Our sources put it simply, love is strategy.
Love is strategy. I like that. This whole approach really reimagines leadership, doesn't it?
It really does. It combats burnout by intentionally sharing the load by design, like Moses learned to do in Exodus. It's about matching responsibilities to gifts, not just piling them on one person.
It prevents implosion by structuring for health proactively, establishing clear roles, embedding conflict resolution, like preparing the Ephesian elders.
And ultimately, it fosters multiplication by focusing on reproducing leaders, not just output, like Paul constantly replicating himself. Every leader should be thinking about training their replacement,
Finally, it optimizes resources by deploying gifts, not just people. Ephesians reminds us to do those gift audits, understand the unique strengths, and map them to actual functions and needs.
So to recap our deep dive today, we've explored how intentional design, really understanding team size, having clear structure, and balancing the unique gifts within your team is absolutely mission critical.
It's essential for building teams that truly multiply.
And this isn't about corporate scaling or just hitting targets. It's about mirroring the life-giving, reproducing nature of the kingdom itself.
It really calls us back to substance over just sheer size, which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Jesus didn't aim to build the biggest team. He built the most reproducible one.
In a world that often equates significance with sheer size, the kingdom calls us back to substance. What if your ministry's greatest impact isn't found in what you build, but in who you send?
Are you building something that can survive your absence? Or simply managing something that desperately depends on your presence?